Today is the New World Planning Form workshop. So today, Sandwich and I are going to introduce a new tool called the World Planning Form. And this workshop, the goal is to do precisely that. So here's what we're going to do. So today, we're going to talk a bit about what is pre-production, because this form that we're going to introduce is designed to help specifically with the phase of pre-production, though you can use it for more than that. Then we're going to introduce a new tool, this new form that people can use, and then we'll have a Q&A. But with that said, feel free to ask questions at any point during the conversation. So we are watching the chat, and so if you have questions, feel free to ask at any point during it, and we can answer the questions. You don't need to hold them on to the end. That's a good question of getting a copy of the form. There was a link in the program announcements. Let me get the link. It's right. A company link. Okay. Yep. Good call. All right. There's the link in chat. So there's where you can download the form. So, all right. So with that said, we're going to jump right into the next slide. And again, if people have questions, feel free to ask along the way. So before we start with the form, we wanted to tee up the idea of pre-production to help explain this part of the development process that this talk is focused on. So in the industry of game design or content design, you'll find lots of different versions of the flow chart we're showing here. So a lot of people will debate, like, where does R&D go or other things? But in general, you'll roughly see some sequence like this. So you have an idea, I want to, make a game about giant sentient tortillas trying to hide from the evil oven monster. Okay, cool. There's your idea. Where do ideas come from? Who knows? Once you kind of have that idea, you're basically already starting to move into the stage of pre-production. Pre-production is all about where you validate an idea. Pre-production is the stage where you're trying to take all of the things that could ruin, hurt, or just all the big issues that might emerge and validate them. So when you're working on a project and you ask questions like, is Horizon technically capable of this? Are my skills good enough to do this? Is this even fun? Is this something people want to do? Do these mechanics work well together, or do they compete with each other? All of those questions you're supposed to figure out in the stage of pre-production. And so in the industry, you finish pre-production when you're confident that you can build the thing and it will be good. And then production is the stage of manufacturing. So it's building out all the details, the polish, fleshing it out. In terms of time spent, it's usually the longer chunk, but it's supposed to be a lot about manufacturing. And then launches when you release it to the world, you engage with your community. You might have a post-production where you keep updating it. But that's the general gist. And so today, we want to talk about pre-production. So we're going to introduce a form where the second you have an idea, you're already ready to start using this form. And the form is designed to help you through this stage of pre-production. Now, with that said, you can use this form forever. Like, if you suddenly wake up and you're like, I'm done with pre-production, that doesn't mean to stop using the form. It's just to be aware that the form we're about to show is designed to focus on this stage. And so with that, I think we hand it over, and I'm going to hand it over to Sandwich, who is going to go over the new form. We'll go back and forth, just kind of explaining this.
All right, so yeah, this is the new world planning form that we put together. Essentially, this is something for you guys to go over as you're getting ready to start working on the world, and also after you've started working on it too. Try to go back to this form, kind of refill it out as you become more clear about your goals and your ideas and whatnot. So there's 4 parts of this form that are included. There's the motive, the audience, the features, and the problem solving. So I'll go over what each of those are looking at. So first, with the motive, this is essentially what is motivating you to build this world. What are your goals for this world? So the motive is really the core part of design where you have a goal for a world, and that everything that is a part of that world is working towards your goals. And in this form, we've got the primary goal and a secondary goal, which you can fill out, where first you can put in the goal type, and then you can put in a goal explanation and how you will measure the progress towards that goal. And you only have to put in a primary goal for a world. Secondary goal isn't necessarily essential, and it could actually be sometimes better to have just a primary goal, because sometimes when there's two goals, they can contradict each other and prevent you from achieving what you want. And so having just the primary goal is okay as well, but there is a secondary goal for you to type in as well. What would you have any comments for that?
Yeah. So, I think one of the interesting things about a goal, and you'll hear this a bunch as we go through this, is if you don't have clarity on this section, the rest of the sections don't really matter. I've seen a lot of times where creators are working on a project, and because they don't have a goal or a clear goal, they really struggle to answer a lot of questions. And so as you see the content that comes next, you're going to see how things are laddering back to the goals. But I think before we go there, it's worth mentioning just some brief examples. So way back when, when I started ZapZap, when I created ZapZap, at that point in time, there were 0 PvPs in Horizon that were even interesting. And so I was like, no one's making PvPs, and I think it's because no one thinks a decent gun is possible. So it's like, my goal is I want to make a gun that proves you can make a decent gun in Horizon, which is why ZapZap has one type of gun and not a lot of complexity. But knowing that was my goal made it very easy when I had a bunch of other thoughts, like, what if I add teams? And it's like, but that isn't the goal I've selected. Now, you can change a goal during a project, but you want to do so very, very carefully. And so I think then to hear, what's funny is in the later stage of evolution in PvPs, I think then downstream of that, Sandwich built Action Island. And so I'm curious, Sandwich, when you started that, what was the goal that you chose, and how did you find that goal so helpful in your development of the world?
Yeah, we released ZapZap and Action Island around the same time, and we had looks like the same kind of goal. Our goal, which was to create a compelling first-person shooter, but to clarify on my goal, which was to increase the playtime for shooter games within Horizon. I played one of the earlier shooting games that Horizon had called Coffin Clash, and I felt like it needed more weapons because it felt like that would create more variation, and that would increase the playtime for the first-person shooter genre. So my goal was to essentially make it so that people could play first-person shooters longer in Horizon. And the reason why that was really essential for me when building Action Island was that it allowed me to focus everything and all the resources I put into the game towards that goal. If I were to, say, put anything else in there, like say there's UFOs way in and you got to shoot the UFOs, that would completely distract the intention of creating a first-person shooter game that gets people to be retained and play for a long time. That wouldn't create variability as much as creating different weapons that interact with each other differently. So by having those clear goals, I did the different weapons, I did the rating systems, I did have the map design laid out where you can play on it many different ways. And all of those work towards the same goal. And without that, then anything would essentially go, and I'd just be scrambling to put stuff in the world without any clear direction for it.
Awesome. And then, I put in the chat just now a link to an example of this doc filled out if anyone wants to download and look at it. It's a little bit of a rough sketch of the world, because I'm already almost done with the world. So I filled out the doc as if I were like 2 months ago. So it's a little hand wavy. But if anyone does look at it, you'll see there in the number one goal for this world, which is true, was I wanted to make another escape room that I could launch, and it would basically reignite my brand. So people would be like, oh, what is this? An escape room, play it, and then want to play some of my other worlds, and they would all kind of be elevated again. So knowing that the goal of this world was to just add another one to the inventory to like scale up the brand, knowing that's my goal, I can't do something weird that's an escape room totally different than anything I've ever built. That would defeat the goal if I'm trying to make another world that make people go, oh, I want to play one of the others. And so it was clear for me in this one of like, I want to do something that feels a lot like the others. So if they do it, it'll be more likely to visit my previous ones. And so just having that goal is super clear. And then the one other question I'll answer and move to the next slide is someone, boss asked, is there a particular criteria or guidelines you follow for choosing a goal? I'll just give you 2 thoughts, and then if you have any sandwich, you can add them on. So one, a goal is super personal. Like, it's why are you doing it? Your goal might be you're trying to release a world that makes a certain amount of dollars per month. It might be you're trying to learn TypeScript, and this is a project to do so. It might be you're trying to just have something to relax on weekends, and this is for fun. You're trying to unlock a new genre that doesn't exist in Horizon yet. Like, why you do a thing is a deeply personal question that, like, it's hard to know which one to choose from. But I'll tell you the sign of if you've written a good goal. Once you know what your goal is, and you're about to see this in the next few pages, if that goal doesn't help answer a ton of questions, then the goal's probably not precise enough. Because the idea, like Sandwich mentioned, is the goal should help you understand, oh, do I need this feature? How important is this feature? Is this type of user important? And like if someone says to me, I don't like puzzles, unless my goal is to make more people like puzzles, I probably should let go of that feedback. And so that's what I always look for is, how many questions does the goal help you answer like daily? And if it's very few, it's probably worth tightening the goal. It doesn't even change your goal, but it probably just means it's like too loosey-goosey. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Sandwich, about making a good goal.
Yeah. Me personally, the goals that I find to be the most useful for my goals are the ones that indicate what I'm trying to improve. So the reason why I think that's really useful is because if we're indicating what we're trying to improve, then there's always things that you can add or put into a world that can work towards improving something. If I have like a concrete end goal for a world, then eventually, you're going to release an idea and then that'll just be the end of it. And when you have indicated what you want to improve, then there's always new ways that you could add to that world and create new ways to work towards it. So like with Action Island, I was trying to improve the playtime for the first-person shooter genre. And there's always new things that it could add to that world, or that I can add to the world to improve the playtime. So those kind of goals have been really useful for me.
Yeah, and I'll just add one more thing because Sandwich just said something really important. So Sandwich, when he said for Action Island, his goal wasn't Sandwich wants to make PvP. Like, okay, that wouldn't really be helpful. But Sandwich said he wanted to increase the playtime in PvPs, which means you can look at what are the current worlds, how long do people play, why aren't they playing longer, what are the limitations, and it gives you a really clear focus. And then when you launch the world, it's very clear to ask, did you do the thing? So if you have like an IWP goal, really try not to put like, I want to make more money, but really try to push yourself to say like, is there in-world purchases? really push yourself to say, is there a percent of people you want doing a purchase? Is there a number of people you want to work to get into your world per month? Because the second you have goals that are that clear, if you're not hitting them, it points you toward where to spend your time to try to like do more. And so again, the purpose of these goals is they guide you on making decisions, and then they help you know when and where to improve. So with that said, let's move on to the next page, and we can talk about more goals later if needed.
Yeah, so the next page is the audience. This is really important as well because it helps you clarify who exactly you're trying to build the game for. If it's not clear who your audience is, then certain nuances aren't very clear. So for example, if you're trying to like make a relaxing beach walk, then your audience is people who are wanting a relaxing world, and so have certain features and solutions and also problems only pertain or only work for that audience. So, for example, people who want to go to a relaxing beach world aren't going to have the same needs and wants and issues as people who are like wanting to go to a scary maze game. So a scary maze world can have scary pop-ups in it and jump scares, and that would be perfect for that kind of a world. But if you had the same kind of elements in your beach walk, then that would, of course, create issues for that kind of an audience. And so having clarity on who your audience is really helps you choose which features and problems are to be addressed for that world. So with this part of the form, you can write in who is your audience, what are their needs and wants does your audience have, and how the world will address those needs, and also how it will acquire that audience. Welcome.
Yeah, and so to give two examples on this one, so most of my worlds I build for the audience of people who would do real-life escape rooms or do real-life escape rooms, which means I'm not interested in making the worlds really easy for kids. If someone is like, oh, I love puzzles, give me a 50-hour puzzle adventure, like that's just not the type of person I'm focused on. And so by knowing like I'm focused on a set of people that do or would play real-life escape rooms, I can then go look at what is the difficulty level of real-life escape rooms? What is there in the Quest store? What else is there in Horizon? Like, do I want to differentiate from those? Do I want to be middle of the pack? But it just like gives me clarity. Likewise, when I built whatever words, so on the goal perspective, I just wanted to build a really fun, silly game that I could hang out within my friends and have fun. That was literally the goal of, I want a world I can go on late at night with my friends. And so I then thought of the audience would be other people who want to do that. People who want to grab a group of their friends and hang out together. But that meant for that world, I didn't focus on how do you get random people to play or like playing alone or this or that. It was, I want to focus on this. Now, I saw in the chat someone say methods about audience research. I'll make kind of one comment on that, and then we'll just keep going so we can push some of these questions toward the end. But a lot of the people in Horizon right now are casual gamers who are doing serendipitous play, meaning they don't schedule to hang out. They just show up looking for stuff to do. They skew younger adults, and they're looking for quick and easy games. So knowing that that's the majority of the audience on Horizon, if you're trying to maximize your time spent, your audience, your revenue, I would encourage you to go after that audience. That doesn't mean you have to. It just means if your goals are about traffic, volume, and whatever, I would lean in that direction. It's okay, though, to say your goal is, I want to focus on adults who are looking to socialize. But if that is your goal, make sure you are taking the time to understand where do they currently go in Horizon, what's not working for them. So you'll see right on the slide right now, it says, what needs or wants does your audience have? and how will this world address it? Because if you're just adding the 30th world of the same type with nothing new, you might not be fulfilling a need they currently have. But if you realize there's a large set of people in Horizon that are looking to hang out in a certain way and there's nowhere to do so, then you might have an opportunity. And so the less you are focused on Horizon's largest demographic, the more you should make sure you think of doing research. Where do they congregate? Do you need to run Reels or Facebook ads to bring them in? And you just want to be thoughtful on how that audience influences your decisions. And we won't go into it here, but there's tons of things you can do of finding research of trends in Gen Z, or, the top 10 types of casual games. And there's like a lot of research out there. The goal of this is to encourage you to take the time to think that stuff through, but not as much to go do a deep dive just on audience studies. So with that said, we'll jump to the next section.
Yep, so the next part is the features of the world. So this is essentially the solutions that you have in order to work towards your goals. And so, for example, we've got different categories. We've got environment and setting, so where the world takes place. We've got interactions, user interface, social, onboarding. So these are all different categories for features, and then you can write down what features or elements within that world that you want to have, which will work towards your goal. So once you've written down those features that you have, you can write in how will those features work towards the goal, and also which goal does this work towards. You can select whether it's the primary, the secondary, or both. So, for example, with like Saber, I wanted to have a Star Wars themed world. So I knew the environment would be Star Warsy. And then I also wanted to have these lava rocks, which dunk into the lava. And so I figured if there's lava rocks, then there must be, like a volcano that you're in. So that was the setting for it. And then I have interaction, which is like throwing the lightsaber, and then social, people interact with each other just by talking with the global voice. So essentially just add in your features and how the features will work towards your goal. Waffle, anything to add there?
Yeah, so I know one thing, Sandwich, you and I talked about before was with Saber, like you had mentioned earlier, you were focused on, I don't know if you mentioned in this talk, but after Action Island, you told me that with Saber, you're like, you want to expand your audience, and that you thought about aging down a bit in terms of your main focus. And so you're like, hey, that's my goal is to, so Sandwich's goal is widen audience of Sandwich games. That audience then for the focus of the next world was young teens centric. And then like Sandwich mentioned, of in that age group, they love dark sci-fi, dark fantasy, spaceships, galactic, like that's a very strong theme. And so Sandwich was like, I'm going to go make a game in a volcano with laser swords because that setting and tone will align well with the audience. And so the main thing here is with the slide you're currently looking at is this isn't necessarily about trying to just enumerate every aspect of your game and just like write it all down. It's about trying to really think about how each of these ladder up to your goal and the audience you've chosen, and that what you're trying to do is make as many of them as possible really like strong and to really support it. And, like I think an example here is like social. I think with the demographic we're talking about, you probably don't want to, in the middle of Saber, suddenly be like, oh, we're going to pause the game and encourage you all to have a deep debate about metaphysics. It's like, this is a sword game for teens. Like, that's not what the audience is looking to do in such an environment. And so when you think about like, at that age group, like what are a lot of social interactions? It's like pointing at everyone else and being like, I'm better, or like, I'm going to get you next. And there's this kind of just like elbow bump, haha, let's go again style, just behavior in these style games. So it's like, how do you build mechanics that ladder up to that? How do you want people to interact in the world based on the audience you've chosen, the goal that you have? And I think, not to put words in Sandwich's mouth, but I'm pretty sure if you suddenly found that the majority of time spent in Saber were adults just standing around chatting, that you would try to figure out why it was performing so far from as you anticipated. And then if you like it, you might switch your goals and lean into it, or you might try to debug and figure out what about the world isn't quite working, which we'll get into in a second, is the next page. But yeah, so again, the main goal of this slide is trying to think of, when you choose an interaction, it's so easy as a creator to be like, and then randomly once every 3 minutes it starts raining, and when it's raining everyone moves in slow motion. It's like, hey, that's a cool idea, but why is that better for what you're trying to do? Why does it add to this thing you're trying to create for these people? I see a lot of times where there's a cool mechanic in the wrong game or for the wrong people. And so the goal of this is to see that laddering up. So for each of these categories, write the features that fit in the bucket and then explain how they work to achieve those goals. The last thing I'll say on this is you might not have good answers. So the point of this form is not that you just sit down right now and you write the whole form perfectly. The point of this form is you write it down and then you look at it and you're like, wow, a lot of my answers don't help my goals. And then tomorrow you try to like make the form a little better, and the day after the form a little bit better. And the whole idea of this pre-production phase is that you keep iterating and iterating and iterating through doing prototypes, talking to people, research, play tests, until you are so confident that you have something awesome on your hands that that like you feel good about. Which, I don't know, Sandwich, if you want to mention, you and I are both a fan of kind of pre-production forever style development, if you want to mention that briefly.
Yeah, same way, especially with my worlds. I released a world and I never really truly finished that world. I worked on Action Island for like over 2 years, and then I moved on to working on Action Land, which is a precursor the world after that. And so I never truly stopped working on that goal of increasing playtime for the first-person shooter genre. And I've been working on that for about 4 years now with that game, and just putting in new features, updating, fixing bugs, and then redo things if they're not working the way I wanted to. But yeah, there's never an end point to this, and there's always just more things you can do to work towards the goal.
Yeah, a big important thing is, one of the most critical questions about a world is it fun? You really don't want to wait until the moment you publish your world to answer that question if you're doing like publish as a big launcher ready to go. What you really want to do, if you favor this pre-production mindset, is when you're building a world, focus on figuring out what is the smallest set of features you can build to start testing it. You don't need a lot of art. You don't need a lot of complex things. Like, I guarantee you, both Sandwich and I with Zap Zap and Action Island had people in there playing them before there were any rounds, timers, or scores. Just like guns and respawning to immediately see, like, do these guns feel good? Because if you have fun guns, people will go in there and for 10, 15 minutes just kind of like laugh and shoot each other. And then at some point they're like, okay, if that's all it is, maybe I wouldn't come back. And that's where the rounds and the scores and stuff really starts to help. But when you think of this idea of validating the idea, as quickly as possible, you want to be getting proof. Does your art style, is it going to fit within the vertex limit? Is your core loop fun? Are your mechanics intuitive? You don't want to be 95% of the way through the development and then be like, this doesn't work. So you always want to front load a question, which is a great transition into the next slide about thinking through these problems early?
The next step is about problem solving, which essentially, this is really the most important or crucial part of this process, because if there is any like really bad issue or problem with the world, then that can easily completely distract the users from the awesome things that you have built in there. So if like you have a world and you've got the best high-special shooter in the world, but then the frame rate's really low, then that's going to cause people to not want to keep going back to that world, or they get sick, or if they're like having problems with starting rounds, or if they can't figure out how to change their loadout, or any of those things. Will all having one or two really bad issues in the world can completely derail everything else that was put together for it. So with this form, we've added a bunch of different focus questions for it. So you can go through and read through those. And this is just, as a small list compared to all of the hundreds or thousands of different issues that can be met in the world. So yeah, this is just a starting point. There's definitely more that you could say write down in another document and answer for yourself. But this is a starting point. And here we've got the focus question, and then you write down the issues, problems, and risks that relate to that question. So let's see, what features might be challenging for users to find. So say you've got like a start button in the world that people have to click to start the game. And people find that start button, or is it hidden somewhere that people can't find it? People don't find that start button, and then they can't play the game. They don't even know that the game exists. Or what could hinder users from socializing with each other in the world? Say you've got like a really large map and the voice setting is on default, then people won't be able to hear each other throughout the world. You'd want to have it on global. So you can write down the issues, problems, and risks, and then how you'll solve and avoid it here. And this will allow you to brainstorm different things that could possibly come up, whether this a design thing or an engineering aspect. So like we've got some in here. See, what aspects of the world are you most concerned can cause performance, memory, or loading issues? And then also design ones, like users struggling to understand elements. Yeah, Waffle, got anything to add there?
Yeah, so I think, this slide in particular is super important. Now, like we mentioned earlier, like you can't even get to this slide until you've done the ones before it. Your goals got to be clear, then your audience, then your features, then the problems and risks of those features. Now, you can immediately take this form and fill it all out, but then work to iterate it toward clarity in that order. When you get to this page, it is super important that you be very critical. So I'm going to give you a sentence for everyone to ponder deeply. Spend more time thinking about the reasons your world won't work than the reasons it will work. A lot of times I see creators are like, the world has this and this and this and this, and it's going to be fun. And they have this whole story of why the world's going to be awesome. And then the reality is it turns out the world's not that awesome. And it's just because they didn't spend enough time thinking about the ways it might not be awesome. So when you get to this page and you start to fill out the issues, problems, and risks, try to make everything extremely critical and negative from the start, right? So you want to fill this page out with, no one's going to do the tutorial. No one's going to read the signs. No one's going to figure out that the index trigger fires the gun. No one's going to understand the point system. Everyone's going to fall through the map. No one's going to feel that the game is skill-oriented. They're going to feel it's too random. They're going to troll. They're going to steal objects from each other's hands. They're going to think the rounds are too long, too short, and on and on. So you want to sit down and assume it's all wrong. And then as you really start to think about what you're doing, so once you sit there and say, no one's going to actually do the tutorial and know how to play. Okay, so what's your solution? It's like, oh, I'll make it that you learn while playing by such and such means. Okay, cool. Prototype it, get some people in there and play testing and see if it works. And if it works, you can then start to say, I'm less worried about people learning. But you don't really want to start to write these positively until you have real proof. So like Sandwich listed one that is like, I feel the size of, you're not worried about performance limits. You can't just shrug your shoulders and be like, I'm not worried about performance limits. You got to sit down and think about how many items are there in your world? How many are there at once? Like, oh, you have 500 different types of hats and there's always 50 available. Okay, what is the vertex count of each? What does that do to your environment? Prototype a hat, prototype the world. And then you can start to say, okay, now that I've thought this through enough, I've done some work to get it started. Now I feel like perf will be okay. Once you got a prototype of your mechanic and you see people playing it and like laughing and having fun, you can say, okay, I think this mechanic works. I think I made this analogy yesterday, but like imagine, Sandwich was like, oh, a bunch of teens are aspiring scientists. And so in the middle of Saber, I'm just going to pause the game and suddenly present everyone with a math problem. And once they do 3 of them, they're like unfrozen. Wouldn't that be cool? It's like, okay, I don't even think that's a correct assessment of your audience. But even assuming he had that, he should then say to himself, but I'm probably wrong. That negative critical mindset. So then you ask, what is the quickest way you can start to see, is that true? Because if it is, math problems everywhere. And if it isn't, probably let go of that feature. And so in the previous slide, you write down, this is the environment I have, these are the features, the interactions. Then you come to this page and you write down all of the things that could go wrong, that as you start prototyping, play testing, researching your audience, you then start to come up with things that you are less and less worried about. And then at some point where you think these all have really good answers, you're launching and seeing if it's true, and awesome. And that's the mindset of pre-production. Sandwich, anything you want to add to that before we move to full Q&A?
Yeah, something I've really discovered as I've released quite a few worlds is that anything that I've thought might end up being an issue in the world ends up being an issue once I've released it to the public. So anytime that I've, built something, I'm like, oh no, I think this will work just fine. I think people will interact with it this way. Once I release it, they end up interacting with in the exact way that I didn't want them to. So by being very cautious and looking for anything that can go wrong beforehand, you're going to prevent yourself from ending up experiencing that once it's released. Because once people go in there and they're, messing around with everything, they don't know what's going on and they're just trying out stuff. And literally every single little crack that was in that world, when I released it, they're going to end up finding it. And so being super critical of all of the features and whether or not it will actually work the way you're expecting to is super important. And anything that essentially can go wrong will end up going wrong. So if there's any little crack, you have to find some way to prevent that that bug or negative experience from happening. And another thing I want to add to this is that the problems that are valid for world are problems that apply to your audience. So like I was saying before with a beach walk, or actually with a scary maze world, having a jump scare in it isn't a problem because that's the audience that you're working towards. But if you have a beach walk, but having a jump scare in that is of course not going towards the audience. And so having that in a beach walk is going to be an issue for that world. So issues for one world may not be an issue for a different world. So you're going to have to think about what your audience is for that. And then when you're finding solutions, try to find solutions which avoid as many, if not all, possible issues that could possibly go wrong when you release it to people. That's it for me.
Awesome.
Welcome.
Nope. So just to zoom out and repeat a few things. So, we talked about pre-production is where you're supposed to validate all the big hard questions. So when you start a project, you really want to say, I don't know if I can build this. I don't know if Horizon can build this. I don't know if this is fun. I don't know if these mechanics are actually good. I don't know if these mechanics go well together. I don't know if this core loop is engaging. I don't think that the leaderboard and the quests are that interesting. Like, you have all of these concerns that you then work to get clarity on. And you get that clarity by thinking about your goal and then your audience and then prototyping, trying, testing, and seeing real proof. And so with this form, I hope all of you download it now, start filling it out, be really critical and nervous, and that's okay, because then tomorrow you can say to yourself, which thing are you the least confident about, and what can you do tomorrow to be a little bit more confident? And then you update it, and the day after, and the day after, and the day after, and then that's how you get to a good world. Like, we won't go deep into it here, but I've chatted enough with Sandwich about Action Island that if you get a chance to hear, like, with Action Island, you approach it and it's like, hey, there's a bunch of different gun types. There's a real concern that if they are not real balanced, one gun is super OP and overpowered, and it just wrecks the game. And only by having this mindset that you're always worried the guns aren't balanced is how you eventually get to a point where you know they are, because you've stopped finding all the ways they were unbalanced and you've fixed them over time. So I don't think we have time here, but if any of you ever have other times where you hear a Sandwich talking about games, or I don't know, you bump into one of his worlds, like, or any other creator, ask them like how they got these things iterated. And then my other advice is, sometimes we get lucky and the first thing we try works. Just because one creator happened to be like, the first map I built was good, does not mean it's going to be for you. Like, certain things get lucky and we don't have to iterate them, and other things we don't. You need to find which is which. So if, I don't know, hypothetically, I'm like, my first Zap Zap map was good enough, I got lucky. Or I should have iterated it and didn't. So have that critical eye on all of your worlds. And so with that said, I just put the link to the form in the chat again. We got 13 more minutes. We'd love to answer whatever questions you have about pre-production, the form itself, the contents of the form, or anything else we've discussed thus far. And since this is a stage, you won't be able to unmute to ask the questions, so we'll just be watching in chat. So definitely type any questions you got. While we're waiting for someone to type a question, I'll scan and see if there are any that we missed. Do see that Moten put something about many people create worlds to have fun. Making a world to have fun is a fine goal, right? Because then if you suddenly have a feature that you're thinking of and building that feature doesn't sound fun, you don't build the feature, right? The goal will motivate you. So if your goal truly is having fun, do whatever is fun. But the second your goal is something else, then that goal should be driving you. So if you're in the middle of working on a world and you're like, building this feature doesn't sound fun, if having fun wasn't quite your goal, you got to power through it. Like, sometimes there's a part of a world that's like, I really don't want to build this, but it's going to make it so much better. So you push through and you let that goal drive you. Jay Bransick said, can you talk about onboarding? What do you mean about onboarding? And yeah, I only see one other person typing. Feel free to just, everyone, put a couple of thoughts in the chat. Jay Bransick, I'll wait for you to clarify. In the meantime, do we have stats on what ages play on Horizon and how many of each age group play and times that they play? There have been no specific published numbers like that from Meta. But there's a lot of like youth in Horizon. A lot of them are going to be in the US, given Horizon's current distribution. And they're going to correlate with when that age group's not in school. So you get to like 3-4 p.m. West Coast time, you get a huge influx as the west of the U.S. is suddenly going in and playing these. Same things for spring break and summer. But yeah, by roaming around Horizon, you can find folks and talk to them and ask. Like the cool thing about Horizon being an immersive social network is it's pretty easy to just find people and talk to them. What do they do? What do their friends do? And that's kind of like on the ground research. But yeah, there's nothing formally that's been studied. You can, though, go find lots of public research that's been done on who currently has and uses VR headsets. But with the big opening of mobile now on Horizon, and you start opening it to a lot more of an audience, you guys all know there's lots of kids on phones and tablets, like at different times of day, and that'll be a whole new demographic wave. Jay Bransick said, talk about onboarding good and bad uses. If I understand what you're saying is like, what is our best advice for how to onboard people into a world? I think that might be a little closer to game design advice, which isn't quite the purpose of this talk. So I wouldn't want to like rat hole into how to make good onboarding. So my answer would be, just to focus on the purpose of this talk, whatever you think the onboarding is, just build a quick, simple version of it and test it. Like, you observing people trying a thing you've built is going to give you infinitely more feedback than just like any high-level thing that we're going to say. There's actually a thing Sandwich said yesterday I want to repeat here, which is when you play test and you get feedback from users, their feedback should not be you interrogating them. When someone comes in and plays your world, you don't want to say, hey, what'd you think? Was this fun? First of all, they're going to probably lie to you and round up. But the real thing is the way you get feedback is you observe. And so like when I first started working on Zap Zap and I would bring people in and play test, I would just watch. When a round is over, does someone start a new round? If they just like kind of like it's done and they just start like chatting or whatever or look clueless, do they even find the button? Do they press it? Do they start a new round? If I go AFK in the middle of a round, do they finish the round and start a new one? That's real feedback. And so something Sandwich said yesterday I really liked was kids especially will give like honest, brutal opinions, or they'll say stuff out loud during a game like, this is dumb, or that was cool, or wow. And just hearing your players emote or get confused or lost or complain. And like I remember literally I was testing one of my escape rooms once and a player was trying to solve one of the puzzles and just said to themselves, this sucks. And I was like, okay, that is more important than anything someone's going to tell me, is there's something there that was not going on. And like Sandwich mentioned earlier, this person was 30 minutes into the world. They were my target audience. I care about them, but something was going wrong. And in that case, the puzzle was just way too hard. But so yeah, when you do testing and look for feedback, make sure the feedback you get is observing people playing. So don't bring people in and be like, how do you like my onboarding? Just bring people in, say nothing. Like sometimes when I bring them to my escape rooms, I'm just like, hey, I'm just going to assume you guys ended up here on your own and have fun. And I say nothing else. And can they go from there? And even that, I'm cheating a little bit by saying that. That's still not even quite a full test. So I know that didn't quite give you, Jay Bransick, advice on onboarding. But again, rather than Sandwich and I being like, here's how to make good onboarding, actually watch people use yours or other people's is going to be infinitely more useful than our high-level ideas. Build the minimal version you can, test it, observe, learn, iterate. Okay, any tips on how to carry out a playtest session? Sandwich, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, just watch people. It's really good to get kids into the world. So like we were saying, kids are very reactive to how kind of game works. So if kids are reacting one way, the adults are actually probably feeling the same way, but are just kind of bottling up their emotions about it. And so if you go out and ask people, how they feel about it, that's not really going to give you as good of feedback as just watching people play with it. I've seen people, they pick up a gun and then they like shoot it a few times and then they like throw it. And so that's like the perfect example of a reaction that somebody had to the gun that wasn't, feeling good for them. So yeah, it's really best not to get too involved with the playtest. If you're in there and people are playing it without any sort of you trying to get them to play it, that's a really good sign. If people are in there after you leave and the instances keep on going, that's also a really good sign. So yeah, it's best to just kind of stay back and watch. Mobile advice: should my goal be to make a mobile-centered game at this stage and neither isn't, or see the payoff yet in terms of users? Yeah, definitely there isn't as many users on mobile, but I believe eventually that could change and really take off in the future. So there's definitely, a lot of incentives for the mobile, and for when that grows, there's a huge market to capitalize off of that. So yeah, I definitely encourage to work on mobile games at the moment.
Yeah, we can't really tell you what your goal should be. Like I mentioned earlier, that's a very personal question. And like if your goal is revenue, you can look at user numbers and all of that. If your goal is to just innovate and build something new, that'll answer your question. If you want to share some of your worlds with your friends who don't have VR headsets, that would help answer the question. And so it kind of really goes back to what Sandra said is motivation. There's a reason we use that word of like, why are you doing the thing? And so the thing I'll say about mobile is like, whoever goes and builds the most amazing mobile world ever, Meta's going to start running ads for Horizon all over the place with your world is the reason people should install Horizon. So like, yes, I know mobile's not there yet, but if you go build the world, like you will be on the tip of that wave. I'm not saying you should do that. I'm just saying if being on the edge of a new platform or trying to just like, be a more visible creator to Meta or any of those reasons could be a reason to do mobile, but I'm not going to tell you should do it because of those, because like why you build is interesting. And so right now, I just converted 2 of my old escape rooms to mobile, and the new one I'm building is mobile compatible because I want to play them with people I know who don't have headsets. That is the motive of why I'm doing that. Now, you might have different reasons. So it has to start with like why you do. All right, quick run through of just one. Oh, go ahead, Sandwich.
Well, when Chris said, do you put them in the tester or publish and pull people in? I actually tend to like to publish a world earlier than later. I don't prefer getting everything perfect before publishing. If I were to try to get everything perfect, then I'd just be constantly in a loop trying to, bring every little detail. But I publish the world as soon as I feel like I have, the largest pieces working to where I feel like that is working towards my goals. And then I publish it, and then I get feedback. From that, it's a lot easier to get feedback after publishing it, even if it's not completely finished. A lot of the biggest changes that I've made with my worlds have been after it's been published. Like with Saber, initially that world was built in like a small little elevator. There was metal all around you, and it felt a little bit too small for people. But the feedback that it got was that they wanted the floor to kind of drop out. And so with that, I was like, okay, well, what if it's dropping into lava and there's lava rocks, and then you're in like this volcano? So the world didn't start out as a volcano jumping world. It ended up there because of the feedback that it got after releasing it.
Yep. Awesome. All right. And then, yeah, so the answer there is add people as testers, publish the world, do both. Use all the different things of testing you can imagine, and over time, you'll build up your own sense of which are better or worse. So at this point, we are at time. So I'll give like a 15-second answer to the remaining 2 questions. Where do you find inspiration or look for references to create your worlds? since this is a pre-production focused talk, we are assuming that when you open this doc, you at least have the idea. So we're kind of like, this doc starts the moment right after the idea. In terms of inspiration, the only general thing I can tell you is play games, play things in Horizon, watch online videos about game design, read books about game design, I don't know, watch movies, read books. Like, inspiration strikes differently for everyone. And I think the best place to find inspiration is to start off with like, why? Like, why do you want to be in here being a creator? And if it's like to just make art, then listen to your inner voice. If it's to bring new genres to Horizon, then let's go figure out which ones it's missing. So the kind of why will help motivate you. Are there any tools to help us observe, like some kind of God mode? I've done a thing in my worlds where I just make it where when I spawn in, it just puts me in a wall or puts me above. It just like literally spawn point of if players wafflecopters move to this place. Or if you're in build mode, just go into God mode. There's a bunch of stuff you can do. But before you start trying to get clever, just spend a bunch of time just watching people standing nearby. You'd be surprised how much you can get just being there. And only when you reach the point where you're worried about your presence can you move on to these more advanced tools. Just bring people, watch them. So to summarize, today we talked about pre-production, the most critical part of development where you're trying to validate everything so that you don't get really deep into the world and end up with a world that's not fun or bad perf or really good for trolls or whatever else. We've shared a form that Sandwich and I put together along with a number of creators in the community who helped contribute content that all of you can use starting right this moment. I'll put the link in chat one more time. There it is. You can download this right now. Please fill the whole thing out immediately and then be really self-critical on the last page, assuming everything's bad and not going to work. And then push yourself to figure out how you iterate toward confidence. The goal is to end up with a good world. You don't need to start with the first right idea. So we are at time. This was recorded. So the video will be out at some point in the future. If folks have any questions related to this, just put them somewhere in Discord, like general or questions. And there's many creators who have opinions on these topics I can help you with. So have fun. Thanks for joining us late on a Friday, if that's your time zone. And I'll see you all around.